Okay, I have with me today Colonel Douglas Macgregor. We're going to be talking about the Russia-Ukraine situation, the United States provoking China as it messes with Taiwan, and now today, aircraft carriers and jets being sent to the Korean Peninsula. Colonel Macgregor, thank you for joining me today.
Sure.
I think at this point we can confidently say that Russia has taken Bakhmut, or at least has taken enough of the city and the territory to claim victory. Do you think at this point Zelensky and Ukraine will finally order military personnel to fall back? Or are they going to dig in and hold out to the very end because this particular battle has become so publicized in the media?
Well, first of all, everyone is mired in this giant sea of mud in eastern Ukraine. Until the mud dries, the moisture ends, and you get hard ground, there will be no major troop movements of any kind. I think the notion of a Ukrainian offensive in April, unless there is a miracle, the sun comes out and stays out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and dries out the soil, they really cannot commit large ground forces, especially all these new tanks that they claim they're going to have, along with anything else, frankly, that moves on the ground. So right now, everyone is stuck with the sea of mud. Secondly, we now know from remarks made by Prigozhin, the man who heads up this thing called the Wagner Group, which is about a 35,000 man professional military organization committed to Russian national interests, has historically operated overseas, primarily not inside Russia, but because of the wars in Russia. He's made it very clear that General Surovikin, who was the man that was brought in late summer, early fall to sort of reorganize the Russian chain of command, reorganize the forces, begin assimilating the reservists and so forth, that he from the very beginning recognized that Bakhmut would be a very useful device to encourage the Ukrainians to commit forces in great numbers to it. Bakhmut has always been very important. This is the second point. It's always been a hub for rail lines, roads, communications, warehouses, factories, all of which have military utility. The fear in Kyiv has always been, if we lose Bakhmut, then the keystone in the edifice of the defense of the Donbass is gone. It will be very hard to maintain the lines of defense that they currently have once Bakhmut is out of their possession. The Russians could have seized this place much earlier. And what we now know, it was a deliberate decision not to do so. Let the Ukrainians occupy it and let them bring in tens of thousands of soldiers that then could be converted to corpses. And this is very, very frankly what's happened. The Russians have relied heavily on this enormous ISR strike capability, the ability to link your terrestrial platforms and space-based platforms that provide you with instantaneous intelligence, i.e. targeting data, to your various guns, artillery that is either tube artillery, rocket artillery, tactical ballistic missiles, and so forth. It may be now that the utility of Bakhmut from that standpoint has been exhausted. And the Russians may simply close it off. But as I understand it, somewhere between 7 and 10% of the urban area that is to the northwest has some Ukrainians left in it. But ultimately, as the ground dries, Bakhmut becomes important for the use of the Russians in order to move forces forward in north and west. Because if you look at the map, it's not that far from Kiev. And it's very close, frankly, in geographic terms to Kharkiv, or Kharkov. So you have Bakhmut is the new center of gravity for the Russians, if you will, in this sense. And that's where the war is headed. And as I pointed out to someone the other day, they said, well, why haven't the Russians destroyed all the bridges across the Dnieper River? Well, because they plan to use them, because those bridges will support Russian traffic. So I think we can see where things will go, but they're not going to move dramatically until the May-June timeframe. Historically, June is when you've had most of the major offensives in the region, certainly in modern times. That is since the age of Napoleon, because you're not going to get far through the sea of mud once it establishes itself. And then you have to deal with this sort of crushing winter historically. Well, we haven't had much winter by Russian standards, but we certainly have the sea of mud. So that's got to go away. Then I think we'll see dramatic movement.
Okay. That's interesting, because everybody's been waiting for this massive offensive and this counteroffensive, but then Ukraine's going to get to it first. So the mud really is the delay. I wanted to pick up on something that General Milley said this week. He said, and he kind of caught himself, he said that Ukraine cannot win this war this year. And he made sure to, correct himself on that. So basically, he's now given himself the rest of 2023 to not win, according to Zelensky's definition, which is to have all Russia out of Ukraine. I don't know that that's even possible, but do you think that he's starting to set up a narrative that Ukraine is starting to lose this, or is he just being honest that, hey, it's their definition and we know they're not going to meet that? Where do you think General Milley was heading with a comment like that?
Well, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And so it's not impossible that there is some measure of honesty sometimes in his remarks. As a general rule, I would write off anything the man says. He's a purely political animal who exists as a mouthpiece for the administration and ultimately will say or do whatever he's told. That's why he got the job. That's why most of these people become chairman. They don't become chairman because of any demonstrated character competence